At my grandmother's funeral reception, my uncle picked up the framed photo of me and her, the one she kept on her mantle for 11 years, turned it face down and said, "We should probably swap this out for something more appropriate." Nobody said a word. Neither did I. I just set my coffee down, picked the frame back up, and placed it exactly where she had always kept it.
Now,
Let me back up. My name is Diane Collier. I am 41 years old. I work as a forensic accountant for a regional firm in Asheville, North Carolina. I've been doing this work for 14 years. My job is simple in theory. I look at numbers until the numbers tell me the truth. I am very good at it. My grandmother's name was Ruth Collier. Everyone called her Miss Ruth. She was 83 years old when she passed, and she was the kind of woman who kept her pantry alphabetized, her checkbook balance to the penny, and her opinions to herself until she was absolutely ready to share them. She lived alone in a white craftsman house on Sycamore Bend Road in Weaverville, just north of Asheville. 2 bedrooms, a screened porch, a garden in the back that she tended herself until she was 79. A cast-iron rooster doorstop by the front entrance that had been there since before I was born. I visited her every other Sunday for the last 9 years. Not always for long. Sometimes just an hour. Sometimes we sat on the porch and she talked about the garden. Sometimes we went through old photographs. Sometimes I helped her balance her accounts because her hands had started shaking and the numbers blurred on her. She never asked for help with anything else. She was not that kind of woman. What I know now, and did not fully understand then, is that those Sunday visits meant something to her that she never said out loud. My family is large and loud and certain of itself. My Uncle Gary is the oldest of Miss Ruth's 3 children. He owns a chain of tire and auto shops across western North Carolina. 6 locations. He talks about those 6 locations the way other men talk about their children. My mother, Sandra, is the middle child. She has spent most of her adult life making sure everyone in a room knows exactly what her siblings are doing wrong. She is not a cruel woman. She is a competitive one. There is a difference, though sometimes the result looks the same. My Aunt Patrice is the youngest. She married well, moved to Charlotte, and comes home for holidays with the kind of luggage that costs more than my monthly rent. I am Sandra's only child. That detail matters. In my family, success had a particular shape. It had a storefront, or a husband with a good income, or a house in a neighborhood people recognized. My cousin Trevor, Gary's son, had flipped 4 properties by the time he was 32. My cousin Melissa, Patrice's daughter, had married a cardiologist and posted about it at length. I had a studio apartment, a 10-year-old Subaru, and a job most of my family described as something with numbers. Nobody ever asked what forensic accounting actually involved. Nobody ever asked about the cases I worked, the fraud I uncovered, the testimony I gave. When I tried to explain it once at Thanksgiving, my Uncle Gary said, "So, basically you're an auditor," and moved on to something else. I stopped trying to explain after that. What I want you to understand is this. I was not invisible because I had done something wrong. I was invisible because I did not fit the picture they had already decided to hang on the wall. Miss Ruth saw it differently. She never said so directly. That was not her way. But she showed me in small things. She kept that photograph on her mantle, the one my uncle turned face down because she had asked for it specifically. It was taken on her back porch on a Sunday afternoon 3 years before she passed. She and I, sitting in the old wooden chairs she'd had since 1987, both of us looking at something off camera, both of us laughing. She framed it herself. She put it in the center of the mantle. It stayed there until the day she died. The week before the reception, I had sat in the front row at her funeral and held my hands very still in my lap. My mother sat beside me. My Uncle Gary spoke. He talked about Miss Ruth's cooking, her church attendance, her garden. He did not mention the Sunday visits. He did not mention the accounts. He did not mention a lot of things. I sat quietly and listened and thought about the old boxwood folding ruler she had pressed into my hand 4 months earlier. We had been sitting at her kitchen table. She had pulled it from a drawer I had never seen her open. The ruler was worn smooth at the hinges, with her father's initials carved into the wood near the 1st-inch mark, WH. She turned it over twice in her hands, then placed it in mine. Keep this somewhere safe, she said. I looked at it. Grandma, what is this for? She folded her hands on the table. You'll know when you need it. I almost asked more. Something in her expression told me not to. I put the ruler in the inside pocket of my work bag where it stayed. That was October. She passed in January. And by the afternoon of the reception, the afternoon my uncle turned her photograph face down on her own mantel, I was beginning to understand that whatever Miss Ruth had been preparing for, she had been preparing for a long time. The reception was held at Miss Ruth's house on Sycamore Bend Road. My Aunt Patrice had organized it. She was good at organizing things that looked a certain way. There were catered trays from a restaurant in Asheville, cloth napkins, a guest book with a ribbon. Everything was tasteful and correct, and somehow managed to feel like it had nothing to do with Miss Ruth at all. About 60 people came through that afternoon. Neighbors, church members, a few old friends from her garden club, family from as far as Raleigh and Knoxville. I stood near the kitchen for most of it, refilling coffee, accepting condolences, listening. That was when I first noticed it. Not loudly, just a low current running underneath the afternoon. My Uncle Gary kept drifting toward the hallway that led to Miss Ruth's bedroom. Not entering, just pausing near it, glancing down it, then returning to conversation like nothing had happened. My Aunt Patrice asked me, very casually, if I had ever helped Miss Ruth with any paperwork. I said yes, her monthly accounts mostly. Patrice nodded slowly. Did she ever mention her attorney to you? A woman named Carol something? I said I didn't know her attorney's name. Patrice smiled. Of course. Just curious. She moved on. My mother found me 20 minutes later by the back door. Did Grandma ever talk to you about the house? She asked. I looked at her. What about it? Whether she had plans for it. After. I told her honestly that Miss Ruth had never discussed it with me. My mother nodded, but her eyes stayed on me a second too long. She always had a soft spot for you, she said. The words sounded like a compliment. They were not entirely a compliment. 3 conversations. 3 different family members. All within the same 2 hours. All asking in different ways about the same thing. I filed it away the way I file everything. Quietly. Without conclusion. Numbers do not mean anything until you have enough of them. In the weeks that followed, things settled into something that almost felt normal. The family regrouped. There were calls about logistics, the house, the personal belongings, the garden tools, the furniture. Gary took the lead, as he always did. He scheduled a family meeting for the 3rd Saturday in February. My mother called me the night before. It's just a conversation, she said, about how to handle things fairly. I said I would be there. She sounded relieved in a way that made me pay attention. The meeting was held at Gary's house in Arden. A large colonial with a 3-car garage. The kitchen table sat 10. It sat 9 that afternoon. Gary, his wife Connie, their son Trevor, my Aunt Patrice, her husband Richard, my mother Sandra, my cousin Melissa, who had driven up from Charlotte, and me. Gary had printed an agenda, an actual printed agenda with bullet points. I looked at it and felt something I recognized from work. The particular stillness that comes right before something important surfaces. The meeting started with practical matters. The garden tools would go to a neighbor who had helped Miss Ruth tend the beds for years. The church furniture she had donated would be picked up the following week. Her car, a 2009 Buick LeSabre with 34,000 miles on it, would go to Trevor because he knew someone who could move it quickly. Nobody asked if I wanted the car. I did not want the car. That is not the point. Then Gary set down his agenda and folded his hands on the table. The house is the main thing, he said. Everyone nodded. We need to understand what Mom's intentions were. Whether she left a clear will, or whether we're looking at probate. My Aunt Patrice said she had tried to reach the attorney, Carol Hendricks, but hadn't gotten a call back yet. Gary nodded. Until we hear from her, we should operate as if things will be divided equally among the 3 of us. He meant himself, my mother, and Patrice. He did not mean me. I did not say anything. I just held my coffee cup and listened and thought about the boxwood ruler in my work bag. My mother called that evening. That went well, I think, she said. I agreed that it had been productive. Gary's just trying to keep things organized, she said. You know how he is. I said I did. You're not upset, are you? About the car? I told her I wasn't. She exhaled.
Good.
I just want this to be smooth. For everyone. I told her I understood. And I did understand. Just not in the way she meant. 2 days later, I got a phone call from a woman named Carol Hendricks. She identified herself as Miss Ruth's attorney. She said she had been trying to reach the family and had been given my number by Miss Ruth herself, listed as a primary contact. She asked if I could come to her office that Thursday. She said there were some documents Miss Ruth had wanted me to see. I wrote down the address, thanked her, and sat very still for a moment after I hung up. Then I opened my work bag and took out the boxwood ruler. I turned it over in my hands the way Miss Ruth had. WH carved near the 1st-inch mark. I put it back carefully. Then I called Carol Hendricks back and confirmed Thursday at 2 o'clock. Carol Hendricks had an office on Marymount Avenue in Asheville, on the 2nd floor of a brick building above our insurance agency. The kind of office that had been there a long time. Dark wood, floor-to-ceiling shelves, a window that looked out over the street. She was in her late 50s. Gray at the temples. Reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She stood when I came in and shook my hand the way people do when they mean it. Thank you for coming, Diane. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. I sat down. She opened a file folder and set it on the desk between us, then folded her hands on top of it. Your grandmother came to see me 4 years ago, she said. She was very specific about what she wanted. Very organized. She had already done most of the work herself before she walked through my door. I looked at the folder. That sounds like her, I said. Carol nodded. She told me something I want to share with you before we go through the documents.
She paused.
She said, my granddaughter Diane is the only person in this family who ever sat with me just to sit with me. I want to make sure she knows I noticed. I looked at the window for a moment, took a breath, looked back. Okay, I said quietly. Carol opened the folder. Miss Ruth had left a formal will, properly executed, witnessed, and notarized 4 years prior. There was also a trust document. And a third document Carol set to the side for a moment. The will was clear. The house on Sycamore Bend Road, the white craftsman, the screened porch, the garden, the cast iron rooster doorstop, was left to me. Not split 3 ways. Not held in the family.
To me.
I sat with that for a moment. Carol continued. In addition to the house, Miss Ruth had maintained a separate savings account for 11 years. It had been opened quietly at a credit union in Weaverville, not at the bank the rest of the family used. The account held $74,000. That account was also left to me. Carol slid a bank statement across the desk. I looked at it without picking it up. My name was typed clearly in the beneficiary field. There's one more thing, Carol said. She reached for the third document. It was a letter, handwritten, 4 pages, front and back, in Miss Ruth's careful, even script. My name was written on the envelope in blue ink. Carol placed it in my hands. She asked me to give this to you in person, she said. She wanted you to read it here, if you were willing. I looked at the envelope for a long moment. Then I opened it. I am not going to read you every word she wrote. Some of it is mine. But I will tell you this. She started by saying she was sorry it had taken her so long to say certain things out loud. She said she had watched me for years being moved to the end of the table, talked over, summarized by people who had never once asked me a real question. She said she had not always spoken up when she should have. She said the Sunday visits had been the best part of her week for 9 years. She said she had chosen me not to cause trouble, but because she trusted me. Because I had shown her, consistently over a long time, that I did not want anything from her except her company. She said, the house needs someone who will sit on that porch and mean it.
That's you, Diane.
That has always been you. And then at the bottom of the last page, in slightly larger letters than the rest, she had written, the ruler belonged to my father. He taught me that you measure twice before you cut. I think you already know that. But I wanted you to have something of his to hold on to. I folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the envelope,
set it on the desk.
Carol was quiet. I sat there for a while without saying anything. The street sounds came up through the window. A truck. Someone's music briefly. Then quiet again. What happens now?
I asked.
The will goes to probate, Carol said. It's straightforward. There are no legal grounds to contest it. Your grandmother was of sound mind and the documents were properly executed. My family doesn't know yet.
No.
I nodded slowly. They're going to have questions, I said. Carol looked at me evenly. They may. That's why your grandmother asked me to handle the notification. You won't have to be the one to make those calls. I looked at my hands. Then I opened my work bag and took out the boxwood ruler. I set it on the desk. She gave me this in October, I said. Carol looked at it. Something in her expression shifted, just slightly. She mentioned she was going to do that, she said quietly. I picked it back up, held it the way Miss Ruth had held it that day at the kitchen table. Then I put it in my bag, thanked Carol Hendricks, and walked back down the stairs to Marymount Avenue. Outside, the February air was cold and flat and still. I sat in my car for a few minutes without starting it. I was not thinking about the house or the money. I was thinking about a Sunday afternoon on a back porch, 2 chairs, something off camera, both of us laughing, and how she had framed it herself and put it in the center of the mantel, and how it had stayed there until the day she died. I knew what was coming next, not because I was angry, not because I wanted a fight, but because I had spent 14 years watching numbers tell the truth, and I knew that once the truth surfaces, the room always reacts. And this room was about to react. Carol Hendricks sent the formal notifications on a Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, my phone had started. My mother called first. I let it ring. She called again. I answered the second time. Is this true? She said. Her voice was not loud. It was the particular quiet that comes before loud. Yes, I said. A long pause. The house. Yes. And the account. Yes. She exhaled slowly.
Diane.
Why didn't you tell us? I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee. I didn't know until Thursday, Mom. You had to have known something. She gave me a ruler in October, I said. That's what I knew. Silence. Then she said, Gary is very upset. I told her I understood that. She said, he thinks there's something wrong with the documents. I looked out my kitchen window at the parking lot below. A sparrow was sitting on the edge of a dumpster doing absolutely nothing. There isn't, I said calmly. Carol Hendricks has been practicing estate law for 26 years. The documents are clean. Another silence. This isn't fair, Diane. There it was. The same sentence. Different room. Mom, I said quietly. I didn't ask for any of it. She didn't respond to that. We ended the call shortly after. Gary called an hour later. I let it go to voicemail. He left 4 minutes and 12 seconds of message. I know the exact duration because I am a forensic accountant and I document things. The message covered several points. That Miss Ruth had not been thinking clearly in her final years. That 4 years ago she was already showing signs of confusion. That he intended to speak with his own attorney. That this was not how their mother would have wanted things to go. I listened to it twice. Then I called Carol Hendricks. I told her my uncle was suggesting Miss Ruth had lacked capacity when the documents were signed. Carol was quiet for exactly 1 second. Your grandmother came to my office with a typed summary of her own assets, a handwritten outline of her intentions, and 3 questions about tax implications she had researched herself, she said. She also brought 2 witnesses she had arranged independently. I have never had a more prepared client. I thought so, I said. The capacity argument will go nowhere, Carol said. But if your family retains counsel, let me know and I will send them the documentation. I thanked her and hung up. The family meeting happened 11 days later. Not at Gary's house this time. At mine. I had suggested it. My mother seemed surprised I offered. I think she expected me to go somewhere neutral, to soften the ground, to make it easier. That was not what I was doing. I was doing what Miss Ruth had done. I was measuring twice. They arrived within 10 minutes of each other. Gary and Connie. My mother. Patrice and Richard. Trevor, who had not been invited but came anyway. I had coffee ready. I had the dining table cleared. I had a folder in front of my seat. Nobody commented on the apartment. That was new. They sat down. Gary started before I did. I want to say up front that this is nothing personal. Okay, I said. We just think Mom wasn't fully herself when she made these decisions. I opened my folder. I have Carol Hendricks's documentation of the signing, I said. 2 independent witnesses, both of whom are willing to provide statements. I also have Miss Ruth's personal notes from the year she executed the will, which Carol retained copies of. And I have 9 years of Sunday visit records, which I kept as part of my own files. Gary frowned. Visit records. Dates, times, what we discussed, anything she mentioned about her health or her plans. I looked at him evenly. It's habit. I document things. The room was quiet. Nobody is saying you did anything wrong, Patrice said carefully. I know, I said. I'm saying Miss Ruth didn't either. My mother had been sitting silently at the end of the table. She was looking at the folder. Then she looked at me. Why did she choose you? She asked. Not angry, not accusing, actually asking. I looked back at her. Because I came on Sundays, I said. Not because I had to, not because of the holidays. Just on ordinary Sundays when there was nothing to get and nowhere to be. The room stayed quiet. She told me once, I continued, that the hardest thing about getting old was not the body. It was watching people stop being curious about you, deciding they already knew who you were. My mother looked at the table. Trevor shifted in his chair. Gary set down his coffee. Then I reached into my folder and set one more document on the table. A single page. This is a letter Miss Ruth wrote to all 3 of her children, I said. Carol has the original. This is a copy she authorized me to share. I slid it to the center of the table. Nobody moved for a moment. Then my mother reached out and picked it up. She read it slowly. Her face moved through several things I will not try to name. When she finished, she passed it to Gary. He read it, passed it to Patrice. Patrice set it down on the table very carefully when she was done. I don't know everything Miss Ruth wrote in that letter. Carol had not shown it to me, but I know what it did to the room. It made the room very still and very honest all at once. Gary did not pursue the capacity argument. There were no attorneys. There were no filings. The probate moved forward cleanly, the way Carol had said it would. The house on Sycamore Bend Road came to me in April. The first time I walked through it alone the afternoon after closing, the rooms were empty and quiet. The garden was overgrown from the winter. The screened porch needed one board replaced. The cast iron rooster doorstop was still by the front entrance, exactly where it had always been. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. Then I went to the mantel in the living room. I had brought the photograph with me. The one from the reception. The one my uncle had turned face down. I set it back in the center of the mantel. Then I took the boxwood ruler out of my coat pocket and placed it beside the frame. WH carved near the 1st inch mark. Her father's initials. Her hands, then mine. I sat on the back porch until the sun went down. The old wooden chairs were still there. I sat in mine. I left hers empty. That felt right. That was 14 months ago. I still live in Asheville. I still drive the same car. I still work the same job, looking at numbers until the numbers tell the truth. The difference is that on Sunday afternoons I drive up Sycamore Bend Road, and I sit on that porch. Sometimes I bring work. Sometimes I bring nothing at all. The garden came back this spring. I am not the gardener Miss Ruth was. I am learning. The family did not fracture the way I thought it might. It bent. There is a difference. Gary and I are not close. We are civil, which is more than we were before. He came to see the house once in the summer. He stood in the kitchen doorway and looked around for a while without saying much. Before he left, he picked up the cast iron rooster doorstop and turned it over in his hands.
She always had this, he said.
Since before I was born, I told him. He set it back down carefully. That was enough. Patrice sends cards now. Actual cards in the mail, the kind with handwriting inside. I do not know exactly what shifted for her. I did not ask. I just write back. Trevor called me in the fall about a property he was looking at. He wanted to know if I could look over the financial documents before he signed. I did. I found 2 discrepancies he had missed. He thanked me for a long time on the phone. I told him that's what I do. My mother is the most complicated part of this. She came to the house in June on a Sunday. She did not call ahead. She just pulled into the driveway, knocked on the front door, and stood on the porch holding a container of potato salad like a question she did not know how to ask out loud. I opened the door and let her in. We sat on the back porch for 2 hours. She talked about Miss Ruth, about things she remembered, about things she wished she had said, about the years she spent competing with Gary and Patrice for something she could never quite name. I listened. At one point she looked at me and said, "I didn't know you came every Sunday." "I know," I said. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I thought about it honestly. I think I stopped expecting you to ask," I said. She was quiet for a long time after that.
She didn't argue.
She didn't defend herself. She just sat there with it. That was the most honest conversation we have ever had. She comes some Sundays now. Not every Sunday. Some. That is more than I expected, and exactly enough. I think about Miss Ruth differently now than I did when she was alive. When she was alive, she was just herself. Present, steady, a constant. You do not always see what a person is doing for you while they are doing it. Now I understand that she had been watching for years. Quietly. The way I watch numbers. Looking for the truth underneath the surface.
She saw what my family had decided about me.
She saw that I had not let it become what I decided about myself. And she left me a house and a letter and an old ruler with her father's initials because she wanted me to have something solid to hold on to. Not as a reward. As a recognition. There is something I want to say to you directly. You know that feeling when you have been patient so long that patience itself starts to feel like a mistake. I know that feeling. I lived in it for years. What I learned, slowly, not all at once, is that the people who underestimate you are not the authority on your value. They are just people who stopped paying attention. And the answer to that is not to make them see you. The answer is to keep going until the truth catches up. It always does. It may arrive quietly. Through a letter. Through a room going still. Through a door you open alone on an April afternoon while the garden is still overgrown and the porch needs a board replaced and an empty chair is waiting on the other side. But it arrives. I still have the boxwood ruler on the mantel beside her photograph. Some mornings I pick it up on my way out the door, the way she used to. I do not always know why. I think it is just good to carry something that reminds you where you come from and who believed in you before you had anything to show for it. Have you ever been in a room full of people who thought they knew you and realized they had never once asked the right question? Tell me about the moment someone finally saw you for who you actually were. Drop it in the comments. I read every one. A woman spent 9 years showing up on ordinary Sundays when there was nothing to get and nowhere to be. When her grandmother passed, the family found out she had been seen all along, and that quiet, consistent presence had been worth more than anyone had bothered to notice. Watch until the end. The house on Sycamore Bend Road changes everything.